Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of New Music Wales podcast from Evolution Studios, Cardiff. Today's episode features my very good friend and outstanding drummer, Kris Williams, for a drumming masterclass. Kris, how are you, mate?
I'm good, thank you, Damien. Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's very kind. I'm honoured to be
No, my
able to
God.
speak to you.
Well, Kris, before I start, I thought I just ought to mention for the adoring fans of Dave Mack that unfortunately he's got waylaid at the studio this evening, so he can't join us. But we'll have to soldier on without him. I'm sure we'll do okay.
You'll be sadly missed, but it's great to hear that the studio's busy, Damien.
Oh yeah, well I think he's back to back as old Dave, but I've got the studio merch which is available from Dave Mack at Evolution Studios.
Fabulous.
Okay, so of course you're no stranger to Evolution Studios, mate. You've been there numerous times before, both playing in bands and of course recording several things that we've done over the years. And I think I ought to perhaps explain to listeners that you actually came over to Evolution Studios a few weeks back now, and you recorded some drum tracks for us, and that's really going to be the focus for our discussion today, as to about why you chose them and what particular types of techniques you're using and how it's influenced your playing, etc. But before we did that, I just thought we'd actually go through some sort of background information, really. So. Of course, we know each other of old. We played together for a number of years in the classic blues and rock band Rattlesnake in Cardiff. Of course, we're not part of that anymore. So what are you doing these days? What are you up to?
I'm keeping pretty busy, Damien. I'm working with a 60s band, playing Stones and Beatles music, lots of other classic 60s stuff. That's really cooking at the moment, playing with a particularly amazing guitarist and bass player. Really good bands. Doing quite a few depth gigs at the moment.
Yeah.
Watch this space. In a couple of weeks I should be playing in a stadium to several thousand people, but it's top secret. I'll keep that under wraps for the time being.
You've kept that very quiet. You must tell me after this podcast.
I will. I'll
Okay.
spill the beans. And also, you may be aware that there's a Britpop band which is in the
Really?
being formed as we speak. Even you may or may not be aware of this or be involved.
Funny enough, I've been practicing a few Britpop songs.
Absolutely, yeah, and me too, But that's very exciting. So yeah, lots of nice bits and pieces happening, and yeah, I guess as a drummer, kind of always in demand, for bits and pieces. But I'm also recovering from a bit of a wrist injury as well, which is kind of hampered me doing tons and tons of gigs and working with lots of different bands. So that does seem to be on the mend a bit, which is great news. But I just
good.
need to.
I know you've had some issues with that over a while, so
That's it. Yeah. But I've had some tendonitis, but with naproxen and ibuprofen and a bit of rest. Not a great thing for a drummer. Rest, is it, when you just want to
really.
beat the hell out of it? But yeah, it seems to be improving.
Great. Okay, glad to hear it, mate. So set the scene then, Kris. Can you describe a little bit about your musical journey? How did you get into drumming in the first place? How did you develop your particular style of drumming? Different bands you played in?
Yeah, well, music really, it's all down to my dad, I guess. So I think as a youngster, my dad's a bass player, plays guitar, he's played in bands, he can sing, and music was always a massive part of the household. So that very early exposure to Jimi Hendrix and Free and and Sad Cafe and Lynyrd Skynyrd and all these amazing bands within his vinyl collection. And I don't know, I remember being sort of this high, and my dad would say, "Have a listen to this," And some of it, I guess, hearing Mitch Mitchell for the first time with the Jimi Hendrix experience, it just blows your mind, doesn't it? But really early doors, I think it was about 6 or 7. This is before I knew anything about the drums, really. My dad wanted me to have organ lessons, like Hammond organ, two console type. So yeah, that went on for ages and ages. And then I think perhaps through listening to all of this great music that was surrounding me, I was really mithering him, Dad, can I have drum lessons, please? I'd love to be able to play the drums. Really, it's a really antisocial instrument, and you can't play the drums unless you're playing with other musicians. And well, eventually, and thank goodness, he gave in. And but the great thing about being able to play the organ, keyboard, piano, whatever you want to call it, is that I can read music now, and I understand music. And so he gave me that initial kind of musical education, which really has underpinned everything, because I played a lot of different styles as an organist. Actually, I don't play very much at all. If you sat me down at a keyboard nowadays, I'd probably struggle. I'd need a couple of days, I think, or weeks or years to get back to where I was. But yeah, I guess what it gave me was that underpinning knowledge, about the structure of music and understanding at least rhythm. And then yeah, so off I went for drumming lessons. And my dad's brother, my Uncle John, top guy, he managed to get me a really rickety old kit, which I think came out of a Royal Naval Club in Liverpool somewhere. Don't ask. It was either in a basement or it got nicked or something. I don't know. But it arrived at the house, and I had lessons with a really fantastic drummer called Carl Price from Billinge, just outside of St Helens, where I'm from. Introduced me to, well, obviously the wonderful world of drums, but the myriad of music, that comes with wonderful drumming, everything from bebop jazz to the heaviest metal, and world music and everything in between, really. And I studied with him for many years. Joined my first band, I think, about age 12, which was a school band, and we were playing all Britpop stuff, which is fantastic because obviously I'm from that era. But my first real exposure with playing with musicians was sort of like age 11, 12, and my dad was sneaking me into local jam nights with sort of semi-pro and pro musicians who were turning up at these. One in particular was the King's Head in Warrington, very, very famous pub. Lots of famous bands had gone through there, but always had a jam night. I think it was on a Thursday night. Could have been a Tuesday or Thursday, but set the scene, these smoke-filled pubs, and there's me, this tiny little drummer, just about peeping over and being sneaked in, and the landlord actually being so accommodating and letting me come in and play. And I got to do everything from, sort of Sweet Home Alabama to improvisational jazz with this, an amazing bass player. So I guess that's where I sort of cut my teeth, and not even knowing it really, because I was so little, and I'm not even feeling nervous and just getting up and playing just purely for the love of it, which I guess has really stood me in great stead, because I just kind of never get nervous with playing. It's just like the drums are kind of, they're just an extension of my limbs almost, really, and I just don't think about anything else when I'm playing. So yeah, the local jamming scene, and then my first band, and then inevitably that leads on to your second band and your third band, and before you know it, by the age of 20 whatever, I'd played with lots and lots of musicians and lots of different experiences, and I played abroad, played in Spain, played at the Casino de San Clemente in Menorca, playing bebop jazz. So
really?
it's kind of been around and done it all, really, and kind of done. I've I guess a bit like a chameleon. I've kind of played lots of different styles. I've played the heaviest heavy metal, and the lightest, smoothest jazz. So I've been lucky from that perspective, and I kind of don't pigeonhole myself. I'm just a drummer. I'm not
Yeah.
a reggae drummer or a jazz drummer or a rock drummer, even though I do hit quite hard. I guess I suppose I would lean towards the rock side, but being influenced by lots and lots of different styles, having played those styles, in bands over the years, and lots of depping gigs. And then I moved to Wales, and that was 2010. Joined a few different bands. Again, some depping stuff as I became known in the area. And then I injured my back. That was about 2014, and I didn't play pretty much in anger until I met you again.
Oh,
When I joined Rattlesnake. Yeah, my back had recovered by that time, but I yeah, pretty much had to give up, and all that time, which was a very long time not to be playing. Um, and yeah, and Rattlesnake kind of got it all moving again. But in between that, I've been playing guitar quite a lot. Picked up the guitar about 14, so I've been plonking away at that for as long as I can remember, really. But first love, really, and the thing that just comes sort of second nature to me is the drums. So yeah, I guess that brings us to here now, really, in a bit of a potted history. Sorry for rambling, but yeah.
no, no, not at all. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, it looks like you had an amazing grounding in music generally. And one thing I've always said about you, you're almost like a walking encyclopedia of music, and it's not just about drumming. I guess a lot of that comes from your dad and your early influences of listening to a wide range of music and then playing that with drummers who covered such a wide range of music.
Well, yeah.
And I suppose, are you able to bring that into? I mean, obviously, with most of us, I guess, when we're playing in pub bands, it tends to be rock and pop covers. But are you able to bring in some of those other more interesting elements, even when you're playing straight pop and rock music?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, and I do, and I think it's like it's always a bit of a test for me. Can I throw that in, and will anybody actually notice? I mean, we can't start sort of going into the odd time signatures if we're
No,
playing straight time, but I mean, yeah, I
little
think
fills
that.
and things.
Exactly, yeah. And I think some of the flourishes that you kind of pick up, and the licks, the chops that you get from playing and listening to a lot of jazz music and funk and Latin music, you end up incorporating that, and kind of weaving that in. Very often, if you're playing something that the audience expects you to play, then you kind of have to stick to it. But yeah, yeah, there's
Yeah,
plenty of
yeah,
opportunity, and even if you just take a song like Superstition, it's everyone plays it. It's a staple, isn't it, of the kind of rock and pop community. But it's because it's funky, it means that you can bring all of those influences, and stick them in. And if someone says, "Oh, we're going to play a bit of Santana," then it's like, "Oh, right, here we go." Then it's you're rubbing your hands together, because you can start putting a bit of samba in, because it sounds so great, but you can mix it with those jazz and rock influences. So yeah, I surreptitiously throw in things, and sometimes as a drummer, you overplay, just because you can get away with it in a live situation. So it is good fun. But in the studio, when I've recorded, yeah, it's very much about what does the song need instead, really.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah, yeah. In Rattlesnake is what you could get away with John noticing, was it?
yeah, that's it. Yeah, indeed. But John, I mean, playing with John was great fun, because he was a
Yeah.
great foil for that. So when we went into those in those instrumental sections and stuff, there was jazz almost under his fingers, and I guess um the kind of call and response stuff is always really really great fun, and that's a kind of jazz sensibility,
Yeah.
of improvising in that moment. So yeah, yeah, John's a tremendous guitarist.
And I thought the two of you did it just to cheese Nick off because you
Absolutely.
love jazz so much.
Oh, he did. That's it. And if there was a mistake, then that was the jazz version. That was it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in preparation for the podcast, and we asked you to have a think about some sort of artists and albums that have meant something to you over the years, that have sort of, had an impact on your playing, thought, that made you think about playing in a different way, perhaps. You sent us a list through, and some quite interesting things, some I've never heard of before. Obviously, some I have, but the first one is the album So by Peter Gabriel, which I am familiar with. I mean, I can remember buying it when it first came out in 1986. What I recall about that, it seemed to be quite an eclectic album. It sort of covered a wide range of influences, from sort of pop to African, Brazilian, jazz. It was really a melding pot of musical influences. Is that what interests you about the album from a drumming perspective?
Um, the simple answer would be the music always comes second for me with these albums. The first thing that jumps out at me is the drumming, and I guess that's how I got into Peter Gabriel. Introduced really again to Peter Gabriel's music and this particular drummer, Manu Katché. He's a Parisian French drummer, absolutely amazing. He's in the top 5 or 10 of drummers of the greatest of all time. Introduced to this album by my drum teacher, and really just an example of thinking a different way about how to lay down a groove, and in particular the kind of offbeat approach, used syncopated approach, which can be used in a popular music sense. Yeah, you're right. I think much later on, and listening to the album for exactly what it is in terms of the instrumentation, amazing, eclectic mix of sounds and instrumentation going on there. Phenomenal bass playing by Tony Levin, and I think it's what I've always done with albums is that I've well, it used to be that you could hold the gatefold and look at all of the pictures, isn't it, and the CD, and look at who was on those particular songs. And if you take David Rhodes, Tony Levin, Shankar on the violin, it's about looking at these musicians and thinking they're phenomenal. Who else did they play with? And if you take Tony Levin, well, he's the King Crimson bass player. So just by holding that album, so introduced me to all of Manu Katché's music and who he played with, and listening to Carly Simon records and then listening to all of King Crimson's music as a result of just simply holding these albums. It just opened up a whole new world of music. But the Soul album is massively influential. Just Sledgehammer alone, the groove running through that sort of skipping, shuffly half time thing, and the way that the bass drum kicks in between. It's just a work of art, and the use of splash cymbals. Manu Katché is a massive influence, and you can hear the influence that he's had on lots of amazing drummers today. So huge album for me, and probably heard that about age 12 and spent nigh on 2 years, I guess, just learning every part and every lick. And if I would, again, it's one of those albums where if I was to sit down at the kit now and the music came on, I could probably play through the entire album without thinking,
Really?
So it's such an influence. Even my seat height, the way that I used to set my cymbals up, the setup of the kit is all very much Manu Katché. So that he's kind of very much at the top of the list for me, in terms of influence, and just an amazing approach, a jazz, a pop, a rock. He's another chameleon. I love the way that as a drummer he he can play hard rock or really light jazz, and it still sounds like him. It's just brilliant. So I guess that's what you kind of aspire to as a drummer, that you're not just pigeonholed, you know?
Well, the second album you've got, I mean, I must admit, not one I was familiar with. So Brand X Product, so fourth studio album by the British Jazz Fusion Group.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
About that?
Again, being about sort of 13, 14, one of my dad's good friends, Colin Brown, amazing bass player, in a local band called the Rebels of Journey's End. Been a very close friend of my dad's for years. Came around the house and he'd always give me tapes of albums, and he'd say, "Listen to this, it's fantastic." And I always remember, I think there's others on the list here, but he gave me some tapes of a product by Brand X, cassette tapes, Return to Forever, Romantic Warrior, and a Rush album called Permanent Waves. And I think those three albums at that point literally changed everything that I felt about drums and drumming, because it was that almost that like light bulb moment of, hang on, this is where jazz melds with rock and roll almost, you know, because jazz for me previously was kind of, you know, I don't know, Buddy Rich and Miles Davis, and it was that, you know, which is fantastic, and I love all of that. But this felt like, you know, even though there were albums from 1976 and I was born in 1982, you know, it felt like this is it. This is the evolution. This is the type of drumming that I want to hear, and I get really passionate about hearing. And yeah, I mean, even the Rush stuff, I felt that it had that kind of, you know, that progressive or almost, you know, that jazz rock type approach to it, you see. So it was just, they were just wonderful albums. But yeah, Brand X is, for anybody listening to this, go and check out Brand X. And if you think Phil Collins' drumming is just, you know, dun, 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 think again, because he is one of the quintessential British drummers. He's a phenomenal jazz rock big band player, amazing. It's really, really sad physically how he is at the moment, but yeah,
I never realised that. I mean, I used to listen to Genesis back in the day, less so of his solo his solo stuff. But yeah, it's really interesting to hear you hold him in such high esteem.
Yeah, massive. Yeah, and if we take, I mean, there's another album I mentioned there, Romantic Warrior by Return Forever. I'm an open-handed drummer. So I play on a right-handed kit, but I lead with my left hand, and I don't cross my hands over. I don't do that. I do that. My hi-hats are here. My ride cymbal is here, just above the hi-hats. And the drummer from that album, Lenny White, is also open-handed. So again, when I found this out, it was like, wow, this is amazing, And I could just listening to that album, I could kind of hear, where my hands would naturally be placed on the kit. I could actually visualize how he was playing it. Whereas a lot of the time I would visualize drummers playing this way and that way, and it would sort of feel awkward to me. But I could actually feel what Lenny was doing on the kit almost, So, yeah, huge influence on me to hear that melding of jazz and rock. But the rolls around the kit, the flourishes, the 5-stroke, the 6-stroke rolls, the way that he would move into little fills by using the snare drum and rolls and buzz rolls and stuff. All of that I would say is a massive influence on my playing today, because I nicked it all really, but I guess though weirdly I felt very comfortable stealing it because it was how my mind was working. I was appreciating that the drumming, the musicality of it, and I wanted to replicate that because it felt very natural to me. So yeah, Lenny White and Return to Forever, Chick Corea, all of that canon of sort of progressive jazz fusion from the late 1970s it's a world of information and almost like an encyclopedia of drumming stuff. If you're ever as a drummer ever short for inspiration, just go and listen to some fusion music. It's fantastic.
I mean, one of the albums you did mention, which I am absolutely familiar with, is Asia by Steely Dan, which of course is a fantastic album. And I can remember buying that when it came out in 1977. And fabulous album, and I think it was their most commercially successful album, wasn't it? I think
Indeed.
Big tracks like Peg and Deacon Blue and so forth. So why Steely Dan? And that album particularly?
Now that's very much about the music, I guess, and the eclectic nature of it. But again, introduced to me as a quintessential drumming album. You've got Bernard Purdie all over that album, and of course the inimitable Steve Gadd. The drumming on Asia just itself, the famous outro section, the famous Gadd Ratamaku thing that he does, which we're all still trying to learn and perfect and throw in as fills, when we're playing Thin Lizzy and blues music and what have you, and failing miserably to do it justice. But that for me was a kind of studying amazing composition and timing and feel and playing exactly the right thing, but just droppingly beautiful in how it's put together. Steve Gadd is again massive influence. It's not just the famous Paul Simon 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. There's so much of Steve Gadd out there on record, and I guess that was my first exposure to Steve, and the things that I've learned and nicked from him, and the dynamics of his playing. He's not a particularly hard hitting drummer as well, particularly in his recording career, and so I guess that album taught me something about subtlety and the importance of it, which is something actually when you're playing a lot of kind of pub rock gigs doesn't always translate too well, does it? Because it is kind of hard and fast and kind of full of energy. But in other gigs that I've played, that sort of subtlety, that the dynamics, I think we call it as drummers, it's so important. But yeah, again, rhythmically, that's just an absolute go-to album for any drummer. Full of nuggets, beautiful playing.
Okay, so Kris, your next choice is 10 Sumner's Tales by Sting. Can you explain why that album in particular?
Absolutely, yeah. For one reason only, and that's the drummer Vinnie Colaiuta. In my humble opinion, the world's greatest drummer, massive childhood hero. I've seen him in clinic at Azuljan Day. I've seen him play with Jeff Beck and Tal Wilkenfeld, luckily, before Jeff's passing. Just to check out some of the jazz fusion albums that he's on, like Jeff Richman, Alan Holdsworth Secrets, just the most phenomenal album with mind-blowing drums on it. He's kind of got everything, this drummer, and the most amazing feel. And on that particular album, there are some great odd time tracks. Drummers are very aware of this record and its importance to us, But 7 Days, and St. Augustine in Hell, the Munificent Seven, I think there's some 5 and 7 tracks on there, which are just, again, mind blowing and beautiful compositions, which don't sound massively technical. They sound musical, but they're an absolute bugger to play. And again, I think maybe sort of age 13 and 14, this album was just on constantly, and I was playing along to it. And my teacher would, we'd learn a double paradiddle. I'd be trying to put this double paradiddle into me playing along to, this album or whatever. And just huge for me.
The other two you mentioned are anything by Miles Davis and anything by Tony Williams, sort of both American jazz trumpeters, band leaders, composers.
That's it. Yeah. Huge influences. Again, my drum teacher introduced me to this. So my dad very much on the kind of rock and blues and progressive side, and then my drum teacher,
me too.
Introducing me to this stuff. And it's just sort of mind blowing because it's I guess the thing about jazz is that it's just not very obvious. And that's the bit that intrigues me. So, I'll stick on a Miles Davis record, and you can very rarely hum the melody, and it's the notes in between, isn't it? And then the way in which improvisationally, the drums is weaving in between the bass and the piano. John Coltrane, Elvin Jones, all this Art Blakey, all this amazing jazz music. But you can take so much of that, I guess, and you can use it in popular music. It can improve your technique, and it can give you more colours in your palette. I think that's probably the best way of describing it. It's a massive influence, but yeah, I kind of come from a rock and blues background because that's the music that's surrounding me. That's the music that bands and jam nights were playing. But I suppose that playing the drums, you're kind of always looking for something extra. And those really technically advanced drummers typically do go and play jazz music. So that was always that avenue for me to go and explore. And that's how I got into it, really, on recommendations from Carl, and then obviously playing jazz with other musicians and being able to take recommendations and snippets from them. They say, go and check out such as Charlie Mingus, for example. Oh, brilliant! Yeah, we'll go and have a listen, and Sonny Rollins, and all of a sudden you're listening to amazing drummers that you've never heard of. And every drummer is different. That's the fantastic thing, really. I'm definitely not a clone of anybody. It's so many different influences, and it's really nice. That I love that, is that you only sound like yourself. You can never sound like another drummer. You can try, but you'll never completely sound like another drummer.
Well, that comes out, isn't it, when you play some of the clips that we're going to go on to watch and describe? Because I can remember having that discussion at the time that when you're playing like Bonham, which we're going to come on and have a look at, you don't play it exactly like him. You play it in the style of, but it's your own mark on it.
Absolutely, and I think these examples are. You can go onto YouTube and you can see some drummers and they will play a facsimile of those drums, and even the audio engineering sounds just like, and it's brilliant. I'm not criticizing that at all. It's fantastic, particularly if you want to learn parts, and they're breaking it down for you. Amazing. I've never been that type of musician. I've never wanted to copy anything. I've wanted to take. Oh, I love that. I love the sound of that. I'm gonna take that and I'm going to try it, and I'm going to try and mold it into something that I like to do, and think, well, I don't think anyone else does that. I don't think anyone else plays like that. So I've always tried to be, even in cover bands. I suppose that's the little rascal in me, is throwing those little jazzy things in, and seeing if anybody notices it. Yeah, I am a bit of an overplayer, I must admit, but that's the whole thing. I've never just wanted to be Ian Pace. I've never just wanted to be Buddy Rich. I've wanted just to be, just to take all of this and create something of my own, really. So,
the last person you mentioned was Stuart Copeland of the Police.
Yes, yeah.
And in fact, I think you've actually got one of his drumsticks, because
I have indeed. That's. Yes, yes.
Shows me he threw it into the crowd at the Reading Festival and she caught it. So we haven't, we can't prove the provenance of this, but
Yes.
yours, and
Yeah.
it was used to stir a tin of white paint. I'd have to tell you.
And the evidence is still there that I've said white paint, and it now lives in my drumstick bag, and it's like my lucky charm it is. So really honoured to be able to own something of Stuart. Yeah, huge influence, I think, on most drummers. The thing about Stuart, perhaps to go back to that conversation we've just had, about, when you hear a certain guitarist, Alan Holdsworth, for example, you hear Alan Holdsworth playing arpeggio or some form of whole notes, ramble on the guitar, and you go, that's instantly, I know that it's him. I suppose a bit like Eric Clapton with the Blues Breakers, or Jimi Hendrix, you know exactly that it's him. I don't think there's another drummer on earth that just sounds like he does. And within the first couple of beats of him playing, you go, that's Stuart Copeland. And he has this unusual, very hi-hat heavy, kind of linear staccato-y approach, kind of almost like a jagged groove to his playing. It's a very strong reggae influence as well. In fact, I really like reggae music, but my first exposure to a version of reggae was the Police. And so it's opening that gatefold, isn't it? And listening to this music. Oh, Stuart Copeland, is he a reggae drummer? And then asking, no, they're not a reggae band, but Burning Spear is. And have a listen to Bob Marley, and all of a sudden, see how music just opens this amazing world to you. And that's how I studied a little bit of reggae, I guess. But my first exposure was that, that strong reggae approach that they took to a lot of their music, with that heavy accent on the three instead of the normal backbeat, and that sort of skipped pattern. But the thing is about Stuart Copeland is that, and he's renowned for some of the intricacies of the hi-hat, which it almost becomes an instrument in its own, actually, under his direction. Interestingly, Peter Gabriel asked him to come and play just hi-hat on the So album. Really? Because he was a hi-hat virtuoso, So really amazing. Pretty sure it's Red Rain. So all that, the hi-hat intro into that, I'm pretty sure that's him.
I'll re-listen to that then, Chris. And
that's it. But he's on that album too. But again, for any drummer who's looking for inspiration, then Stuart Copeland is your man. He's phenomenal.
Okay, mate. Well, moving on to the skills element then, the drumming masterclass. So what you're going to do is you're going to say a little bit about the first track that you have chosen, and then we'll have a look at it, and then we'll come back and discuss it. So the first clip you're going to play for us is from Paul Weller, and it's Aha Oh Yeah. So if you could just briefly explain why this track, and then we'll have a look at you playing it.
Sure. Yeah, that whole album, that first Paul Weller solo album, one of my favourite drummers, another childhood hero. I've got many of them, but Steve White, just a beautiful jazz rock drummer. Who can kind of play anything with an amazing feel. But what I took from listening to this album was the snare drum work within the groove. So there's a lot of these nice little buzzy rolls that he uses, these little press rolls within straight ahead grooves. So a lot of drummers perhaps would play bum bat bum bat. Steve White introduced me to that bum bat bum bat bum bat. That digging into the snare drum. That's probably the best way of describing it, without going too technical. But also using single stroke rolls, double stroke rolls within kind of sort of standard grooves that perhaps you've heard on loads of other types, 60s type music, Beatles, Stones onwards. But yeah, it just captured me really, how Steve would very much sit back in the pocket and use these little flourishes within what would otherwise be straight ahead grooves to make them sound so rich. And that track in itself is just a brilliant example. The Steve plays a lot of bum the bat the bum ba bum bat the bum the bat bum ba bum bat, and that bum ba bum, that skipping bass drum pattern, instead of what a lot of drummers I guess would play bum dat bum bum bat, you know. So he's taking it into a more swingy feel. You can see the jazz influence. Yeah, and being very impressionable growing up, I heard this and just thought that sounds absolutely amazing, how he's driving it. And that particular song, I have stolen so much from that. So yeah, I owe a lot of how I play the drums in a rock and pop sense to that album, particularly Steve White. Actually, I've shamelessly stolen his licks.
Okay, well, what we'll do then, we'll first have a listen to a clip of the song itself without you playing, and then we'll cut to you playing the clip, and then we'll come back and have a brief discussion about it. Okay.
I took a trip down Boundary Lane, try to find myself again. At least I thought I left somewhere, buried under a hedgerow near a lazy bridge on a hot afternoon. Water glistening while he plays a tune. Cloud burst on a rainy day, wiping all my sleep away. Aha, oh yeah, aha, oh yeah, always. They're too confused and fool
So, Kris, that was fabulous, mate. I mean, I particularly noticed what you were mentioning about the little buzz roll on the snare drum, and quite an interesting beat in the breakdown bit.
Yeah, absolutely. The breakdown section, again, it's something I've just totally stolen from Steve and have used on countless times. That sort of hard, crashing of playing a beat and then really driving it by digging into the snare drum, but keeping it kind of upbeat and funky. It's got that kind of almost Keith Moon-esque type, kind of on top of the drums type of approach, hasn't it? But keeping that big back beat going. I just like the way that it sounds like a jazz drummer playing rock music. To me, that when I first heard like the Return to Forever stuff, it was like, that's rock and jazz, put together. That's exactly where I want to be within music. It was the best of both worlds, really. And fusion can be a bit boring. What was great about listening to this particular album is that there are amazing songs, and that there you've got. Well, I personally think it's like absolutely acid jazz. When people think of that meld of soul and pop and jazz and funk. Brilliant example to anyone that hasn't heard or studied that first Paul Weller album, the first solo album. It's a must, I think, for any musician. It's brilliant and it stands up beautifully even now. But Steve White's drumming across that album is just a marvel. It's brilliant. And again, another
for budding drummers out there.
Absolutely. At any level of drumming, it's an absolute must to study. And Stanley Rhodes, what came after, 2 albums after it, amazing critical commercial success. But that first album for me is it's brilliant. It's soul and pop and jazz all melded together with this just incredible drumming. And he's a British drummer as well, which is something to be proud of too.
All right, well, your second one, interesting choice. So, Refrigerator Car by Spin Doctors. Again, some fabulous musicians in that band. Why that particular track?
Well, I suppose you've got to go back to the album. So that album arrived in my possession on Christmas Day. I must have been about, 12 or 13 at the time. My dad had heard Spin Doctors. I think he'd seen them on the TV, and he just said, "You need to listen to this. This is where it's at." And there's so much brilliant music on that record. So kind of forget Little Miss Can't Be Wrong and Two Princes. I mean, they're both brilliant compositions in their own right, but there's progressive jazz influenced rock and funk on this record, which is just wild. Again, budding drummers, have a listen to Shinbone Alley and Hard to Exist off that album. It is just wonderful. And Aaron Comes, the drummer, again, another one of my childhood heroes, hence the reason why I'm playing that track. But that particular song, it's just really interesting. It's got the most amazing intro. And then there's some odd time, and I guess we can talk about that in a second. And then there's some really straight ahead hard rock Bonham-esque type stuff going on. But that whole album, even now, I think that album was 1991. So yeah, it's I think it was actually if it was 91, then I received it younger than I thought. Which is quite amazing.
So around
so
about that era, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, that just shows how old I'm feeling. But anyway, in and around that era, and yeah, just phenomenal, and it has been a consistent influence and something that I've gone back to time and time again, like those other albums that we're talking about, really.
Okay, then, well, again, what we'll do then, we'll have a little listen to the clip of the track itself, and then we'll cut to you playing a section of the track, and then we'll come back and discuss it.
Right.
Kris, that was fantastic. Seemed to have a very odd time signature on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we've alluded to the intricacies and the interesting nature of our time signatures for drummers, that they're like musical conundrums for drummers. I think we kind of love them or hate them. I love them. This is a brilliant example, as well as the odd time stuff that's on Ten Summoners Tales, actually, of a drummer approaching an odd time signature to almost make a kind of musical conundrum and inflection of some form or another, so that there isn't a very obvious end to where the bar is. The bar line kind of runs over each other. And if you listen to the section, there's the kind of marching rudimental introduction, and then it goes into that sort of really heavy guitar riff. Aaron's playing, because of the 9/8 time signature, it starts with a downbeat in the bell, and then as it runs across the bar line, that sounds like an offbeat, or is it the other way around? I think it might start with an offbeat and then it's a downbeat. But that constant inflection means that it's a very circular feel to the music. There isn't a dropping off at the end of it, and I found that really interesting as a budding drummer to listen to this. So Vinnie Carliuta, another brilliant drummer who does this fantastically, the way that he's able to knit odd time signatures by displacing certain beats and by playing over that bar line to actually make it feel like it's in straight time. It is.
Is that particularly unusual?
Yeah, I think that there's certain drummers that do it brilliantly. I think it's unusual for straight ahead jazz. I think it's unusual for kind of straight ahead rock music, but in fusion music, it's very prevalent. And it's not just because it's a musical exercise to do it, or because they're showing off. It's just because it's really interesting, and probably doesn't necessarily come natural to them, and they've got to think about it and work it out. Well, maybe with Vinnie Carliuta, I think it comes very natural to him because he's the best. But it's beyond a musical exercise. It's creating something which is beyond just straight time, which is also equally fantastic, But it always catches my ear, this sort of stuff, and I always want to be able to do it and to play it. Talk about Led Zeppelin early, the crunge is another really good example of that sort of, the way that the beat lilts across the bar line, and it feels like straight time, but it really isn't, So again, any budding drummer, go and check out some odd time stuff, because it will make you reconsider where the one is. It'll almost internalize your metronome by having to count to 7 and count to 5 and 13 and 19 and whatever subdivision it is, and then going beyond that and then not having to count, and being able to just feel it. I think that's where you start actually feeling the music and why odd time works for certain music, So. Yeah, very, 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 very worthwhile investigating that and studying that, I would say.
Well, actually, you mentioning Led Zeppelin leads us nicely on to your next one, which, a favourite of mine, Good Times, Bad Times by Led Zeppelin. So, again, do you want to say a little bit about this before we listen to the clip?
Well, Led Zeppelin are arguably the greatest British hard rock band that there ever was. Yeah. John Bonham, arguably the greatest rock drummer, but much more than just known as a rock drummer. Just a phenomenal technician and exciting, and again a drummer that played things in a completely different way from anybody that came before. Influenced again by jazz drummers Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich, which is just fantastic, isn't it? That you could be so in love with with these guys as drummers, but then create what Bonham did, and it's not, their influences they're not always obvious, which is brilliant. I love that. Yeah, he was anything but heavy-handed. I've heard that about him. He absolutely wasn't. Subtle, loud, big drums. Played with his hands. Played with really big sticks.
It's really unusual style, wasn't it? I can remember chatting to my good friend Gav Young, who's a great drummer, and he was saying that if you looked at the drum score to some of the Zeppelin songs, you'd think that can't work. That just won't work.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, just a brilliant approach, and again another one of those drummers that you instantly know within a couple of notes of him playing, that's John Bonham. Yeah. Really.
Okay, well, again, we'll have a listen to a clip of the track itself, and then we'll watch you playing it, and then we'll come back and briefly discuss it. Kris, that was fantastic. Loving the Bonham signature skipping kick drum.
That's the one. You've heard it straight away, and that's the thing to talk about. I mean, having said that, it's just a great groove, isn't it? And it's slinky, and the way that the cowbell is in there. I didn't play the cowbell because again, I don't want to just play exactly what he's playing. You see, I want to take something and put my own stamp on it. And but yeah, that signature, those signature doubles on the kick drum, again, for any aspiring drummer, have a listen to Good Times Bad Times and work on your skipping bass drum technique, because it's so useful. You can use it in fills, in solos, in big endings. You can use it in beats, in between little 6-stroke rolls, and tailing off with that skipping bass drum. You know, it's just a fabulous piece of music, and yeah, he's inimitable, really. And yeah, as a rock drummer, pop drummer, again, I think, yeah, his approach was different, and you can just learn so much from how he's applying himself to the songs, really. You know, even down to the fills and the displacement of them. It's just brilliant.
Okay, thanks. Well, your next one, I wasn't familiar with this one, so this is Squib Cake's Tower of Power. Chris, tell me a little bit about this.
Yeah, so Tower of Power, an amazing San Francisco soul funk band from the 1970s. I was introduced to these guys again through my drum teacher. And David Garibaldi, being a low sitting funkster, massive influence on my playing. Yeah, they're just fantastic. The bass playing is amazing. The horn section, but yeah, Garibaldi's drumming, again, it's inimitable. It's it's him straight away. And yeah, no doubt we can have a chat about the intricacies of that after we've heard some of the music.
Okay, let's go to the clip and have a listen. Chris, that was very busy. What was going on?
Yeah, I know, and a little bit too heavy. I think I'd be getting sacked from Tower of Power if I was if I was playing a gig with them. Not that would ever happen, but yeah, David Garibaldi, I suppose, for me, it was an introduction into linear drumming. One hand, one foot, the other hand, doing something different independently of all of the other. So nothing coming down together at one time. So, hand, hi-hat, hand, foot, that kind of approach. Linear drumming, it's really, really interesting to have a look at. Rick Latham's book, Advanced Funk Drumming, is full of linear patterns. And Future Sounds by David Garibaldi, another great book for aspiring drummers to go and have a look at. David Garibaldi is a study alone in subtlety and using ghost strokes. So the ghost strokes, you've got the backbeat, that's the big money maker, that keeps everybody going like this. The ghost strokes are the things that are played in between. These little notes, they just give beats and music loads of texture. They make grooves sound the way that they do because yes, busyness, but in a very subtle way, and you can slightly shift the inflection of a beat just by the little ghost notes that you're playing in between. That's what I took from David Garibaldi when I first heard Back to Oakland, and particularly Squib Cakes. When I first heard what he was doing in between the backbeat, if you take those ghost strokes away, the beat's pretty simple. They're simple funk grooves, really. There's a bit of skipping, kick drum and stuff. It's some interesting open hi-hat patterns, but yeah, just those ghost strokes for me were mind blowing, and I guess massive influence. Like Steve White's playing as well uses a lot of ghost strokes. That's how I play when I sit down at a drum kit, and if someone say just lay down a groove, there's always going to be ghost strokes for me because that's what I take, and it's imprinted on my drumming soul, really. I can't really play without them nowadays, and I've nicked them, but I love the sound of it, and that's become my sound is very much ghost strokey all the way through. So an important lesson, that, really. And again, for any budding drummers, ghost strokes I think that's what elevates, straight ahead, great playing. It elevates it to somewhere else. It gives drumming texture and dynamics by using ghost strokes. So highly recommend the study of them across any style.
Okay, right, Kris, your very last track, the iconic Rosanna by Toto.
Yeah,
I was a little surprised you chose this one, so tell me why.
Jeff Porcaro. Again, another hero, the greatest studio drummer of all time, the drummer with the greatest feel of all time, arguably. And Rosanna it's one of the holy grail songs for all drummers. Everybody tries to play the halftime shuffle. Again, I'd love to be able to play exactly like Jeff. I think sometimes I get close, and then sometimes I'll and it just and I'll listen to it back, and it sounds like something else completely totally different. But that's cool as well in its own way, because it's I'm not trying to copy him, but if you listen to John Bonham play Fool in the Rain, if you listen to Bernard Purdie on the Asia album, there is a halftime shuffle, and I think that Jeff took those amazing performances and he put his own stamp on it with that fluid, silky groove that he's got, with an amazing composition as well by the Toto boys, amazing bass line, and suddenly you get this incredible, and there's not much more you can say about it other than just as a drummer, you need to learn it, it's just wonderful.
Okay, let's have a listen, and then we'll come back briefly and discuss.
Yeah.
Rosanna, never thought that a girl like you could ever care for me. Rosanna.
That was fabulous, Kris. You can certainly pick up the sort of slinky nature of it with the halftime shuffle. That was beautiful.
That's right.
Okay, well, I think that sort of brings us to the end of this podcast. It's I found the whole thing absolutely fascinating. I have learned quite a lot over the course of the last few weeks, just doing some of the research behind this. I hope we obviously took a lot of your time, Kris. We appreciate that. So I hope it wasn't too onerous for you.
It's been great fun, actually. Kind of the mechanics of putting it together and revisiting some of this music has been wonderful, actually, because it's taken me back to a time, maybe sort of 30, 35 years ago, and it's almost given me a kind of renewed enthusiasm for it all again. So thank you to you and Dave for inviting me to do this, because it's been a real pleasure and honor, and it's always lovely working with you as you know. I've got a huge amount of time and respect for you, Damien. But equally, it's been a lovely opportunity, actually, to revisit it and rethink these things, and sort of almost like take a step back and think, well, what, how did I get here exactly, musically, and and re-listening to some of that has been a bit of a kind of an emotional return to another time, some of which I kind of forgot how I felt about it. So it's been good fun. So thank you both. It's been great. And if it can influence another generation of drummers, that'd be amazing, wouldn't it? So
that was always our sort of aspiration for this, really. To inspire people, and that's what Evolution Studios is about, really providing a space for people to come and make music and learn music and play with other musicians. So it's been fabulous for that. So thank you again, Kris. Finally, I would just ask all our listeners, also our friends, to like and subscribe to the channel. It does help us. We do appreciate it a lot. And don't forget to get your merchandise from David McDonald. And so we'll wish you all a good night, and we'll see you again on the next episode of New Music World podcast from Evolution Studios. Bye, Kris. See you tomorrow night.
Bye. Thank you.